Hey friends, welcome back to Jenny Food and My Kitchen. It has been a bit of a week. There has just been so much going on professionally, my private chef and catering business, testing recipes, making all the food for all the people. So thank you so much for bearing with me as I'm a couple days late. But here it is. Today, we are making something that I have been wanting to make ever since I saw the video. Now, my friend over at Hope's Homemade Kitchen, she made this sour cream rhubarb coffee cake. And the moment I watched her video, I knew I'm gonna be making that as soon as my rhubarb gets here. So today's the day. Let's make this. I've got all of our ingredients to make this coffee cake. So I've got flour and sugar, rhubarb from my farmer friend. I've got sour cream, butter, eggs, baking powder, baking soda, salt, oats, brown sugar, vanilla, and cinnamon. Now, I think once we put all of these together, I think we're gonna make something delicious. All right, to get started, I am going to add a cup of regular granulated sugar into my mixing bowl. And then I have, this is a completely room temperature softened stick of butter. And I'm gonna get this going back over here at my mixer. And we're just gonna get that butter and sugar all creamed together. So I've added my 2 eggs and I'm just gonna go ahead and get that going. And I'll let that get all incorporated. And while that's going, I'm gonna add a teaspoon of vanilla. All right, now we're just gonna go in with that vanilla and let that get all incorporated in there. Now we're gonna get our dry ingredients together, and I just added flour into here today. Trying not to make a mess. Can't promise anything. All right, there's 1 cup. And we're gonna whisk these dry ingredients together, and then with the sour cream and the wet ingredients, we're gonna kind of alternate here in just a couple minutes. 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. I always bang the side of the bowl. And then we're gonna go in with a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. So that is our dry ingredients, pretty simple. Flour, baking powder, baking soda, and salt. I'm gonna give those just a little bit of a whisk. I'm gonna take this back to our mixer and I'm gonna add the sour cream, 1 cup of the sour cream and the dry mix, alternating just to kind of until it all comes together, and then we'll add our rhubarb. And that is as simple as that. All right, I've got our 1 cup of sour cream measured, and we're just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start by adding just a little bit at a time to our bowl. And we'll get that mixed in. And once that's all incorporated, I'll start adding our dry ingredients. And I'm just gonna do that a little bit at a time here. All right, more dry. All right, I've added the last of our sour cream, and I'll get that going again. Once I see that kind of mixed in, I will go ahead and finish with that flour. All right, that is the rest of our dry ingredients. So now I'm just gonna let this mix. I don't wanna over mix it. So I'm just gonna let that go until I don't see any dry flour. Hope says to save out 1/2 cup of rhubarb for the top of the cake. So I'm gonna go ahead and add that in, and we'll let that begin to mix in, and that'll finish mixing the rest of that cake. And that takes like literally no time at all. And it looks like our cake is ready to pour into our pan. All right, so now I'm just gonna go ahead. I've got a little bit of oil in the bottom of this 9x9 cake pan. And I'm just kind of spreading this around. And I like to put parchment paper down as well, just so that I can grab this cake out and cut it evenly once it's cooled. So we'll do that. Put our parchment paper right in. And then now Hope said that this dough is not like a batter. See how thick that is? That is kind of a thicker dough. And to me, it reminds me almost of like a good, like solid, quick bread type recipe. I have like a cinnamon sugar bread that reminds me of that. So I'm gonna get all of this out of our bowl and then just press that into the pan. So now I'm just gonna kind of spread this out as even as possible. Like I said, this is not like a cake batter. This is like almost like more of a dough, just kind of a condensed thick dough, but I think this cake is gonna be wonderful. All right, so now we're gonna start with that crumb topping. I've got half a cup of flour, half a cup of oats, a third of a cup of brown sugar. Now I have dark brown sugar today, but I don't think that's gonna make a difference. All right, and to that, half a teaspoon of cinnamon. All right, and then lastly, I've got a quarter cup, which is half a stick of butter, and I'm just gonna kind of cut that in there. It's still a little cold, it's not room temperature, but you don't want like soft butter. I'm gonna cut those in, and then I'm just gonna use my fingers and kind of pinch this all together and just make that topping. Just using my fingers to kind of crumble that into pea-sized bits. All right, and once you see all of that flour and butter combined, you should be good. And you can see it's kind of piecey, not super big, but not just crumbly. All right, so now we're just gonna go ahead and add that half a cup of rhubarb that we reserved for the top. Just kind of scoot that around, make sure that everybody gets a bite of rhubarb. Rhubarb is one of my favorites. I have a rhubarb custard pie video on this channel, and if you haven't seen that or tried it, you're going to want to this rhubarb season. Putting that crumb topping all over the top of our cake. And then I've got my oven preheated to 350, and then we're gonna let this bake for somewhere between 50 and 55 minutes. All right, friends, I'm just kind of cleaning up my mess that I made. The cake is in the oven, but I just wanted to take a minute and I wanted to talk to you about my friend, Hope, from Hope's Homemade Kitchen. She shares really good recipes, step-by-step instructions that are so easy to follow, and she inspires me all the time. Not only does she support me in my videos, but I love to support her and watch her things. I've used many of her recipes and ideas. So if you haven't had a chance, get over to Hope's Homemade Kitchen, check her out, give her a like and a subscribe. Thanks, friends. All right, so it is the next day. I did get my rhubarb coffee cake finished, and then I went to work. I was running out of time, and then I came home and I made 2 more. Now yesterday I served this wonderful rhubarb coffee cake to my church for breakfast, and let me tell you, it was a big hit. Now, as you can see in the picture, I gave it just a little bit of a glaze on top just to kind of bump up that sweetness, and I just thought, let's just fancy this up a little bit. So I did put a little bit of a glaze on it, but I'm telling you, I took a couple pieces home for me, and I have a nice bougie cup of coffee, which is my favorite. So I've got coffee cake and coffee, and I am all set to start my day. So let me give you my thoughts on this wonderful coffee cake. It's a good coffee cake. That dense batter, really, I mean, it just feels luxurious, kind of dense, like what you want with a nice, good cup of coffee, you know what I'm saying? It's not overly sweet, it's not too sweet, that rhubarb is not too tart. I mean, this really is perfect. Like I said, I only added a glaze just to kind of bump up the visual because, I mean, it's coffee cake. So, but Hope, this is a wonderful recipe and I thank you for sharing it. Friends, I'll see you later this week with another wonderful breakfast idea. You're gonna like this one. So I'll see you soon. Bye for now.